So in our panel discussion today, we will talk about cross-border workers, remote workers, nomad visas, and related issues. Usually an employee is subject to social security deductions, what we know as provident fund dues in India, and is eligible for the benefits in the country where he works, and that helps where he works. Now, countries enter into social security agreements or what is known as totalization agreements that help avoid double coverage for cross-border workers and treats the workers of both the host country and the home country equally regarding social security and, like I said, in our case, employee provident fund matters. India does not have such an agreement with the US, and I especially mention that because we are talking here on behalf of the American Bar Association. But we do have totalization agreements with Belgium, Germany, Switzerland, Luxembourg, France, Denmark, South Korea, the Netherlands, and Hungary. So we only have 19 of them at the moment, and we don't have them with the key locations where we send a lot of our workers, and that is the United States and the United Kingdom. The other issues that we're going to touch upon today is requests to work from home, remote locations, including from other states within India and from overseas. Some countries like Spain, Mexico, Dubai, Norway, and Hungary, to name a few, have introduced specific visas for international workers who are independently working in their country, and these visas are colloquially or casually known as nomad visas. It's a great opportunity for them to have people living and spending money over there, and the criteria they have for it is very low. In India, we don't have a nomad visa. We have a lot of misuse of our tourist and visitor visa where people are using them and coming here to work. But our immigration laws are not enforced very strictly, so they get away with it. But Goa as a state has seen an opportunity over here and has announced that they are looking into it now. I have a problem with that because a state cannot make visa policies for a nation. So hopefully they're going to influence the government and get India a nomad visa. Now, let's first start closer home. Manish, during our planning calls, you mentioned remote working was prevalent in your company and in the national capital region even before COVID hit us. Because during COVID, all of us became very familiar with remote working and work from home, but you say that you're used to it even from before. Please, could you share with us your experiences on this?
Thank you. See, basically, let us look at how human population...
Sorry, Manish, I promised them we'll make them laugh. Huh?
Okay. So what I'll do is I'll modify the question and give you a brief background as to how this globalization and localization has been taking place insofar as India is concerned before I come to COVID and what happened and how we have been working. So if you look at the movement of mankind has been there always, and insofar as globalization and localization has started with the nomadic, today we have nomadic visas, but nomads used to move from one country to another, and there were no countries from one geography to another, to be precise, without visas. The concept of visa as we know today has only come in the later part of the 19th century, and then there was visas insofar as which were travel documents which were issued during the Roman Empire and the other empires which were there, and certainly half the world moved from Africa. And in India, this globalization and working in different places, and this took place. I think from the historic perspective, if you were to look at it, is I can see during the Alexander, when he left his people, so people used to come here as mercenaries and soldiers and things of that nature. So I think those were the first kind of foreign workers. And so apart from mercenaries, you had the slaves. And then the Indian, there have been many invasions, and you have seen that the workers who came did not go back, and those who did not go back worked over here. And later, you would have seen that insofar as the globalization of the Indian workforce was taken place, it took another kind of a spear during the Turkish rules and during the slave dynasty, and you found those slaves who came over here who were supposed to be foreign workers without pay, but then they became our masters, and you had in Delhi the slave dynasty. So therefore, foreign workers have been coming, and mostly they've been very happy. It's not the other way around, and that social security was not an issue. In the modern context, when you see, not in the modern, in the medieval context, even if you look at it, you will find the Mughals. And when the Mughals came over here, you'll find the entire nobility was either Persian, Turkish, or Central Asian. So you had them, and if you look at half the Delhis named after Safdarjung and Nazafgarh, and these are all Persian names. So we did have a lot of Persian influence, and Safdarjung Enclave and Safdarjung Airport, which covers half of South Delhi, were all foreign workers. But then this concept again changed. I'm just giving a little historic perspective, otherwise it would have been very boring. So if you look at it again, I just thought I would jog my memory and see how the workers. And the classical, you had nomads coming, and then you had mercenaries coming, soldiers coming, and then you had the nobility coming. But the true sense of terms insofar as the employer-employer relationship, that started with the European colonization, whether it was Portuguese, whether it was Goa. I'll touch with the Portuguese. I'll explain why Goa is different, and you will find that the Portuguese, the Dutch, the French, and then the English, and you see that insofar as these foreign workers were concerned, these were the Gora Sabs, and they created this bureaucracy and the entire system in which the education system and this entire system were all created. And raise your hands who have read Renan Martin. So Renan Martin, Renan Martin was one book, that red book, 169 odd pages, depending upon which publisher published it. You will find those were written by the two men for the children who had come to India. So that was there, and then there was a school called in Chennai is the oldest school. Apart from then, there is St. Thomas, which is in Calcutta, which is 1889 or so. That's the second oldest school. So it had a very good quality, and then it dropped till I graduated out of that school. So you had that. So I promised I'll make you laugh, maybe at my expense. So the quality of that school is very bad. So sorry for the Bengalis who would handle it. And that's the only school which is also made out of the Act of Parliament, the British Parliament.
Now I'm curious, which school is that?
That's St. Thomas. Okay. So then you had all these workers which had come to India, but Indian workers also went abroad. So when did they went abroad? Apart from that fact, missed the Chola Empire. There we had Indians going outside, and then we have the Indian workers who went to these Maldives and Mauritius and things of that nature, and also
as indentured labor.
So they went as labor, and then World War I, World War II, we had a lot of Indians. Most of the Indians who went abroad, they saw West for the first time. They went to US. And you had that Kamagata Maru instance where you had, insofar as the Indian going and migrating to US for the first time. So those were the original movement of people which took place. Then we
Tell us about the movement within the National Capital Region, please.
I'll come there. I'm almost there. So then you had another. Then we got independent, and once we got independent, then there was no movement. So the Sikhs, if you look at it, the Punjabis who had moved as 1905, after the wars which Britishers took them, so they went to US and Europe, and that's why you have a lot of people who go from Punjab going to Canada, so those were the workers. Then after independence, and then I'll come to my company where it stands, after 1991, things changed. So between 1947 to 1950, not many Indians went abroad, or many foreigners came to India, except Nepalese, who under the constitution they could work.
We have a treaty with them.
We have a treaty with them, and so therefore for working they don't require even a visa or any other thing. And then after the IT, we missed the first revolution, second revolution, and then when the IT revolution came, that was our time. But by that time, America had not come out of that hangover of the Kamagata Maru instance and things of that nature. Indians were unwelcome in 1920s and things of that nature. And with the IT revolution, what has happened is that today, my company, we work in, so you have all these IT companies in 7 cities. I'll call them by their old names: Delhi, Bombay, Calcutta, Madras, Pune, Hyderabad, and Bangalore. If you look at these Pardon me for the pronouncing the old name, otherwise my flow would have stopped. And that is how. So what has happened, Bangalore and things of that nature, East Coast and West Coast, they have become extensions of these cities. So therefore, if there is a holiday in East Coast, you'll find that insofar as the IT companies are having holidays and the similar kind of a behavior in West, and insofar as the West Coast is concerned, you will find insofar as Gurgaon and all these banking and things of that nature, and therefore we are extended arms. So therefore, we may be sitting in India, we are following their calendar, and you will find all the laws which requires that when we started that women could not work after sunset in Gurgaon, the law was there, that got changed. I will not take my time after this, but I'm explaining how this movement entirely, completely changed. And therefore you see insofar as all the back offices and starting from and the credit goes to GE because we had a factory there and my promoters played golf with them, and that's how we had that US relationship, and that's how the Gurgaon came into being, and that entire book which you will find that the world is flat. So that is what happened. And with COVID, what has happened? So what happened is that Gurgaon became a satellite. I'm coming to this. Gurgaon became a satellite city. Unlike Mumbai, which is in Maharashtra, unlike Bangalore, of course, Hosur is there, and after that, if you go, and insofar as there is ample, Bangalore is an airport which is in Chennai, so therefore between the two, there is a Tamil Nadu, so there is a huge big difference which is there, but Delhi was very unique. So insofar as movement of these people are concerned and remote is concerned, you could have one office you could be appointed in Delhi, but working in Gurgaon, your appointment letters invariably stated in that time that the registered offices of the companies were in Delhi, so therefore you would get your appointment letters, and everybody was in fact in a way or the other working remote. So therefore one state or another state, and insofar as offices and lawyers, they have offices in Gurgaon, but the courts and other lawyers are in Delhi. So that in that sense, insofar as this remote working, and once you go to the court, you don't come back. So that's also remote working.
So, that becomes remote living then.
Yeah. So that's how, if you look at the banner in which we are changing, and now you would find that there were certain jobs which we thought which can never be transferred from US because they were the core and they required this, that, and the other. And today what has happened is that today India is benefiting more for the very simple reason that all that myths that insofar as certain core jobs could not be done except out of Manhattan. So now those myths are broken. And they said that if you can work from home in US, you can very well work in India, Bangalore, Chennai, or wherever. And therefore today, after this journey of 2,500 years, working remotely and working from anywhere is to the India's advantage, and advantage to the new generation. Thank you.
Thanks, Manish. So, Sowmya, he spoke about working from multiple states. How would you help companies? Because you're in private practice, you've got many companies as your clients. How do you help them comply with the Shops and Establishment Acts of the different states, labor laws in the different states? And please tell us how these would apply to situations where it's work from home or work from company premises in different states.
Thanks, Poorvi. I think before I say anything, I think I should tell Jindal guys that please have a course on geopolitical history of labor, and please ask him to sort of helm that course, because I've had a fascinating 15 minutes listening to this entire part.
Summary.
I don't think any of us studied labor law like this at all. It was all about dry cases, and nobody wanted to. It was not the most favored course back when I was studying either. That's what I said. I think please do it, because I think it's a fascinating way of looking at labor.
She means it as a compliment, not a punishment.
Absolutely. See, compliance with labor laws is not very interesting. So, but if you look at labor in this way, in terms of a political and compulsions, I think it's fascinating. But coming to your question, Poorvi, on the details of that. So a lot of, once you get into practice in labor law, a lot of it depends on a lot of these state-specific legislations, which we probably wouldn't have heard of in college, which is the Shops and Commercial Establishments legislation. Most of the states have it, except Arunachal, I think. And they were all drafted in the 60s and 70s. Some of them are fairly more recent. So they belong to a particular vintage. So some of the things, and remote working was there, like Manish said, always, but it didn't get the kind of push it got, obviously, because of the last 3 years. So it also helped that the state government said, SEZs, you guys work from home. They gave out those broad notifications, which kept extending it. But of course, there's no guidance on compliance and what happens after that. So it's all well and dandy to say, fine, extend it, but what happens? How do the compliance guys go about it? So one thing I think he already brought out, saying that, you give out appointment letters saying that this is the registered office of the company and whatever applies to that office applies to you no matter where you are. So in shops and commercial establishments legislation standpoint, if my company is registered in Bangalore and I'm sitting in Gurgaon working, the company can say that all the shops and establishments legislation governed of Bangalore applies to me even though I'm working in Gurgaon. But that could be tricky in some instances because it's not only the registration and other compliances. This act governs other things like your leaves, your holidays, and overtime, things which are also very specific to each sort of state. I'm not even going to Calcutta because that has a history of having the maximum number of leaves, and it's very difficult to rationalize Calcutta with the rest of the country.
That was my question. What do you do with Durga Puja then? If you
Yeah.
are headquartered in Bangalore and you have an employee in there,
Calcutta has the maximum number of leaves, I think.
so you have to give it to them if they are situated there?
They will push for it. Whether we give it or not, I don't know. But they will. Durga Puja, I think, is a completely different
Sacrosanct.
ecosystem.
You've gotta give it.
Ecosystem altogether. But these are the challenges that come from, say, a hybrid or a permanent sort of work from home. So we really need to think through. One of the easy way out is to say that, yes, the registered office, that law governs the entire sort of employee strength wherever they are. But that's not always so simple because you have to be, if there are a large number of employees working out of a particular state, you can't say that I will be governed by the laws of, say, Bangalore, because Yugadi is a festival in Bangalore. Nobody cares about Yugadi, say, in Gurgaon, all of that. So we need to sort of have...
So Sowmya, sorry to interrupt, but I want to bring you back to our topic.
Yeah.
What about if they are working from home?
Yeah.
Remotely and working from the company premises, especially from an employee safety, cyber security, all those perspectives, how do you handle that?
So a lot of it is governed by the internal policies of the organization because we don't have very strict remote working laws yet. They were supposed to come, and the codes, we've been hearing about that for a long time. So there was a mention saying that in one of the draft model standing orders which said that, work from home can be permitted, but you have to figure out the details. So apart from that, we still don't have a comprehensive sort of legislation, and a lot of it is dependent on the policies of the organization.
Policies.
Yes.
Okay.
So they need to really sit and figure out what is going to be our direction with respect to workforce going forward. If it's permanent work from home, then we need to have a lot more think through in terms of how do I protect the data, what happens if the employee doesn't log in from a particular
Device.
Yeah, device. How do we handle personal devices? Somebody said WhatsApp in the data privacy thing in the morning. They said WhatsApp is now the preferred mode of communication. People can do whatever they want with their personal WhatsApp. So how do we sort of challenge all of this? A lot of it is policy, and we really need to have a lot more discussion on that.
Roopa
as myself.
wants
Can
to
I
make
add
a
to
comment?
that? So, Sowmya, one of the things which I was hearing is the person working remotely or working from home or in particular state because the company needs them to be there or because they choose to be there?
It's a mix of both from what we've seen, because now I think it's become a lot more employee focused generally orgs after COVID or so they use that as a retention tool now. So they'll say you can work from wherever you want. You don't have to come to office.
So can I sue from wherever I am, even though my employment agreement says courts of Bangalore? Can I come to Delhi and sue here?
Strictly speaking, you can't take away the jurisdiction of the local place you are working in. So you can go to, say, if you're a workman, you can still go to the labor department wherever you're working. But that will have to be like a factual thing. It depends on how long.
So I'll just add to that. If you look at just a small thing, by suing, you'll have to go to CPC or the contract. Insofar as an employment contract is concerned, it will invariably say that all disputes and differences arising out of or in relation to this agreement shall be subject to the courts of dash.
And the laws of the state of Dash.
Yes, it
Yeah,
may. Yes,
because
it
of the
may.
shops and
So it says that that's the long and short of it, and that's the end of the matter. Otherwise, you will go to the CPC, that is where the cause of action has arisen or where the defendant resides.
Right. Great. Satyajit, I'm taking you out of the order over here. Could you tell us if you have received requests for work from overseas and have you dealt with it? Because remote work can be from within India and from overseas. So a lot of American companies during the COVID pandemic, they had employees saying, okay, I'm going to Greece, my wife is there on holiday, I'm going to sit with her on an island and I'll work from there, I'll do all your work. And for a while they sort of had a loose policy and they allowed them to go. And then companies like Google, etc., introduced strict policies where they said, you've got to tell us what gives you the right to work there. Because in a foreign country, you have to have a right to work there. You can't just go and start working. So have you faced requests like this, and what did you do with them?
Sure, Poorvi. I think we have not only faced those, but we continue facing those, and including, you spoke about some nomad visas. There's an LTR which is being given by Thailand, which
Yes.
they're saying you can be remote worker,
Remote, yeah.
you can come here, work here, we give you 10 years, you need to have a certain amount of earning, you need to work for an international company, and please come and work here. So we've started getting a lot of requests. I don't know why Indians want to go to Thailand, and what's the great thing about it.
Now that's asking questions.
But we honor all those requests.
Are they all men?
Yeah, interestingly, they're all men. And strangely, quite a few of them are saying, my wife's got a job in Bangalore, so I've got to move there.
Well, through the lie detector.
Yes, we need to do that. Background check. But, and it's, so, I mean, one example was, of course, Thailand. And there were many other examples that people wanted to go and work in the Philippines. So we asked them, look, what's the reason? Do you have somebody? So no, we just want to take a break. We want to work from there. We've seen photos and it looked very nice. And if you're letting me work from home and I work somewhere in the hills, why can't I go and work from the Philippines? So there are obviously those issues around, like you said, work permit. There's obviously issues around, we want to cover employees under insurance. So that issues of, tomorrow if there's a dispute, where would they sue? What laws would apply to them? Stuff like, if let's say we say shops and commercial establishment, we know he's working in Philippines or he's working in some other country, would that apply? So lots of those questions, and I think, frankly, when we go out to practitioners also, a lot of them say, look, these are new things which are coming up.
We are figuring it out.
We are figuring it out. There's no one answer, one size fits all. And I think that's fair enough. And what we've also done is we continue with a flexible approach. We have a sort of thing that whichever business doesn't want people to come back, that's fine, work from wherever you are. But yes, internally there are a lot of questions around things like cybersecurity. If something happens, we've in between we explored a remote monitoring solution, also saying that look, we'll monitor, and that went through a lot of obviously pushback. And there are a lot of companies out there which are providing those solutions, and they're providing they're coming with all sorts of apparent safeguards, saying, okay, look, you won't be able to see who's behind you. We'll try to blur the background, various things. But of course, the scare of then, for example, somebody's working, but it's in the same room. There's different family members changing and walking around.
Odd.
It's very difficult. And one more quick point I had was that and may not be an Indian question, but when we did that shift, the first thing which came up, I have colleagues who work in the UK, they came back and said, look, we need to do a workplace assessment. We need to see the place you're working in. Is it safe? Not only safe in the sense of something falling on you, etc., but even things like
The chair.
even the chair, even your posture, like are you able to sit? And in India, where people are working from their beds and from dining tables and all of that, that
In Bombay, they don't even have space for the dining table.
right.
So this workplace assessment in the UK was really interesting because all the UK employees, including law firms, actually had to send a person to their employees' home to check out their chair and table. And if they were not ergonomic, like Vani mentioned, they had to buy it for them. So that sort of increased their cost, and also it had a big gap in their work. Right? In our office, we shut office on one day, and next morning we were all working from home because we worked on the cloud. I didn't have to check their chairs, thank God. Sorry? No, we did it voluntarily, but the law doesn't require you to do it here. I'm talking about the law in UK required you to do it, because if tomorrow she had a slip disc and she blamed it on the chair, you had to compensate her, so you had to do it. I'm going to jump to Sowmya and then come to you, Vani, again, and then to you, Roopa. Sowmya, we just spoke about working overseas. What does it mean for the company? Does the company face any risk by having these people floating around in Thailand and Philippines?
Okay, one of the biggest risk is tax. What we call a
Tax to the employee?
tax to the employer,
Employer.
global employer. So that's the most obvious risk, because in Indian laws don't disallow you from working from anywhere. So it's not as much of a labor law or an employment law risk as much as it is a tax law risk. So very, very broadly, if it means that an employee is sitting in India doing work for the foreign employer forever, for example, that could mean that the foreign establishment has presence in India and therefore would be liable to tax in India. It's quite complicated in terms of how that tax is calculated, whether there's a double taxation treaty and all of that. But there is a big risk for the employer to pay tax in India if there is a person sitting in India working for the foreign employer. So because of this, there's a lot of creative solutions which people are coming up in terms of how, if whether secondments can be explored, if the foreign employer has a local entity, can we second that person, make him the employee of the local entity? There are various ways of coming to it, but I think this is one of the biggest risks.
Great. Vani, you wanted to say something more about permanent establishment and risks, Vani?
Well, permanent establishment, especially between India and US, it's a very notional
So
concept.
tell us what it means and what could trigger it and what it means to the company. Could you tell us, please?
So I'll explain it to you. So the permanent establishment is basically a very notional concept of having, I'm going to give example of America and India, that an American company has set up an office in India. And notionally it is operating from there, it's conducting business. When I say business, it means selling, not just selling, manufacturing, you're providing services. So let's suppose, and I'll give you an example. In the aviation sector, you're not manufacturing planes, but you're servicing the planes in India. Would that make you a PE? Yes. And that's the big question that the regulators looking at, and that's the big question that the companies are trying to address, like GE, Rolls-Royce, everyone else across who's doing business in India, that, what is a permanent establishment? How does the taxability impact us? And so there are a lot of criteria, and there are a lot of bilateral treaties which define the criteria of a permanent establishment. There are certain lacunas, and like expert lawyers like Sowmya advise regularly clients as to how and what qualifies to be under permanent establishment and how it is taxed. So when I say permanent establishment in India, it is a very sensitive issue. It is something that, it is often very highly contested and defended and by corporations like ours, because we are in a position where we say we are always not selling in India. We are not manufacturing in India. However, we are just conducting business. So how do you define within the tax regime the applicability of law to you? And that is where, the entire concept of PE is very big. Now, having said that, also, and I'd just like to add on to one thing that Sowmya spoke about with regard to remote employees working overseas. A very big question that, I saw in my organization coming up was with regard to employee benefits, especially insurances. Any claims that would come overseas, how would corporations look at that? That was an issue which came up during COVID. It was fine if my colleague wanted to be in Goa for 1 year. He could go, live there. It's still India. But what would you do if he wants to go to another country? How will that assessment happen in terms of taxability across, especially as far as taxes is also concerned, because they were employees who were outside the country for over 120 days, just living abroad. And still working for the company in India as an employee of India. So a lot of questions came at that point of time. And work from home, and like Manish mentioned, it is not a concept, it is a concept we're all aware of. We've seen our American counterparts, our European counterparts do that for years, for decades together. But in India, the acceptability to work from home came, unfortunately, thanks to COVID.
Yeah. Thank you. Roopa, can you tell us what you tell your clients to do? Do they have separate policies for work from home, separate for working abroad, etc.? Do you advise them, and how do you advise them?
Yeah, so I'm just going to define these concepts.
Sure, please.
You have work from home.
Yes.
Then you have freelance. I have to bring that in, gig.
Yes.
Okay, whereby you're self-employed. So I think self-employed has been around. where you work from home self-employed. Then you have remote working for somebody else. So when you say remote work, I think you have an employer. It's
Yes.
not, it's not
an
self-employed.
employer with an
it's an
employer.
employer-employee relationship.
You're
right?
working remotely from the employer.
Correct. And then you add that to an employment relationship. Then you put in a consulting relationship. So you might work for, two employers. Then you bring. I'm thinking we're talking about moonlighting. We may not have time for that, so I'll just bring
Right,
that.
yeah.
So you might be working for more than one employer. So in terms of what one would advise, and definitely the employers have to have policies in relation to remote work. And this heavily, because right now, many companies like ours, we give our laptop. So there's no BYOD. There's no bring by your own device. So we monitor, our security is very, extremely high. We monitor everything that goes in, including any app that you download. Of course,
Admin
I cannot send an email to a Gmail account. And then, a lot of times, but of course now we are getting into the hybrid mode. So specifically in my team, and one of the reasons I'm hiring also, specifically in my team, it's a highly, the team was hired, I think, around some part of the team during COVID times. Remote work has become kind of a norm, but now we're trying to get people back to work. So that is where, it gets tricky. So going forward, employment agreements will have to say, and expectations will have to be set that, one has to follow company policies. And if that particular time company policy means it's a hybrid, 2 days, 1 day, then that's what you follow. Yeah.
So the employees that you took on during COVID don't want to come back to office now, and that's why you want new staff?
Well, some of them, yes.
Some of them.
Some
Then
of
how
them.
will you terminate
No,
them?
no, it's a mix. It's a mix. Yeah, I mean, I think
I
right
want
now.
to know how you'll terminate them.
No,
Can
no,
you
no, no, no.
terminate them for not coming back to
No,
office?
it's a mix. It's a mix. So we cannot do that. I don't believe, because they were hired at that point. I wouldn't put it on HR.
You wouldn't.
I would
put
not.
It. You want to handle
I
it.
want to handle
Okay.
it. I would be the HR. So the manager of that unit needs
Right.
to handle it extremely carefully. It all goes down to productivity. Now the kids who are here, I'm thinking you guys are in the fourth. I have to do this because your generation is going to see something which, none of us were privy to, right? For some of us, COVID has made it easier, but work from home, especially in the legal sector, unless you're an independent advocate. Right? Advocates definitely had a room in front where they would meet clients, single people. But as the law firms grew, that was unheard of. Unheard of. The good news is obviously there's a lot of, now it's changing. And you guys are now, some of you are going to start work remotely.
And that's very hard.
And it's very hard at your stage.
Very hard.
You have to be very disciplined. So my new hires, I'm telling them you have to be ready to come into the office. But unfortunately, then I'm not able to hire from small towns. Unless they want to move, right? And my company is a smaller company, doesn't have budgets for relocation at that age and stage, right? So those are the, you lose out on talent, okay? Which is why I have to talk about my other gig, what I've co-founded right now. So I'm a gig player and I'm acting head legal of a company which I have taken on an on-demand project for 6 months. This was unheard of earlier, okay? What we've also done on the other side, my company, basically, that's what we've been trying to enable people to work from home from wherever they are and give them projects and get access to work for people who are not the largest firms.
But that came before COVID. You promoted Flyworks before COVID.
Yeah. So I've been working, that was my big
Correct. So you were
disagreement.
enabling remote work even before COVID.
Yes, freelance and,
Freelance remote
Yeah.
work. Correct.
So I was enabling people, but that's why when COVID came, I was like, oh my God, COVID's taken away my story. But the thing is, you guys have so many opportunities, right? So and now the point is just be productive and make use of those opportunities and work wherever you are.
There are a couple of things I want to tell you all, especially because I see that some of you will be entering the legal labor market. If you don't have fire in your belly to learn, and if you are not a person who can stay engaged without being in a work environment, do not work from home. You will not move forward. You will become just a cog in the wheel. You will be doing run-of-the-mill stuff and not excited. But if you have fire in the belly and you're ready to work, even remotely, you will go far. Okay, coming back to my questions, because I still have a few more and we have only a little bit of time. What we are going to do is we had actually broken this up into 3 parts. We finished with part 1. We are going to part 2 where we are going to talk about Employment Provident Fund and the recent Supreme Court judgment. And we had a third section on cybersecurity, not cybersecurity, but data protection and privacy. We're going to skip that because we had a fantastic panel on that in this morning, and I hope many of you were present there. So now let's go to this, expat employees, social security and EPF issues, okay? So foreigners working in India, but they remain on the payroll abroad. This happens very often because they don't want to terminate their employment abroad. So they come to India for 2, 3, 4, 5 years and they continue to be paid overseas. That is allowed under the law. So they get a work visa to work in India. They get paid abroad as long as the Indian company pays their income tax deduction, their TDS, at the rate applicable to them. And then they also comply with Employment Provident Fund contributions. So as long as the company they're working for is less than 20 people, there's no problem. But if that company is subject to EPF compliance and they have a foreign worker, that foreign worker must receive Employment Provident Fund benefits. So that's what the law is currently. And like I mentioned in the beginning, if they have a treaty with the home country, because India is the host country, then they can get double EPF avoidance. They can claim their benefits, but otherwise they cannot. So now when we're talking about this also specifically becomes relevant with the US. And why that is so is because in the United States, there are 2 very popular visa categories. One is the H-1B visa and the other one is the L-1 intra-company transfer visa. The H-1B visa is for professionals and it generally allows employees to work there for 6 years unless they are on green card track. Then they pay social security dues on the salary that they earn within those 6 years. The company has to provide them with that benefit, and that there is a portion that is deducted from their salary and paid to the Social Security Authority. But they cannot claim any dues on that because Social Security benefits are only triggered if you have completed 40 quarters of work and Social Security contributions in America. 40 quarters, you need 10 years of work. These people very often have to leave at the end of 6 years, so they do not get that benefit. So it's a complete loss. When the foreigners come to India, they contribute to the EPF, and it is a challenge to withdraw that money, and one of our speakers will talk about that now. So let's get to the questions. So Roopa, let's start with you. I said all foreign workers working in India are subject to EPF, but you all must have heard of the term overseas citizens of India. These are foreigners who are of Indian origin and they get a special registration or a special certificate as an overseas citizen of India. Now tell me, Roopa, are overseas citizens of India subject to EPF and why?
Yeah, can I take 2 steps back and
Sure.
just explain to the group, because when I was their age, I didn't even know what that was, EPF. 2 steps, please.
Please go ahead.
Yes, so guys, retirement in India, 3 things. Provident fund, which you collect and then you withdraw at the age of retirement age, generally 58. Second, pension, where there is a prospect where it goes from provident fund to the pension fund, and then you basically, after you retire, and you need to be working there for 10 years in the workforce, and then you basically withdraw every month after that. You get paid every month. Third one is state insurance. We don't have to worry about that. Okay, so what we're talking now is provident fund. That's the first part. Basically, employee salary, 12% of the employee's salary
Paid by the employer.
By the employee and the employer. The statutory limit is up to 15,000. Okay, anybody making more than 15,000, you don't need to do anything. But today, people do it. Even though you earn a salary more than 15,000, they do contribute to the provident fund. That's the first one, not the third, 1, 2, 3, right? The first one. So you do, it's 12% of employee, and the employer also contributes 12%. So 12% and 12% of either 15,000 or the whole amount, whole salary amount. So now coming to your question, for OCIs, OCIs are, okay, the answer is very simple. I did some research. They are international workers. And the thing about international workers is under Indian law, you would have, if you were not an international worker and your salary was over 15,000, you didn't have to comply with the
had
PF
an
law.
opt-out.
You could just,
You could
yeah,
opt out.
exactly, okay? And you would have to contribute only if you opt for it, wanted to. But for international workers who come from a country that does not have a totalization agreement, you don't have a choice. So you're stuck with the same thing. You basically, it's 12% of the entire, and these guys get paid, these expats, get paid.
$100,000, $200,000
per
year.
Yeah. So they get paid a lot. Yeah, they get paid a lot. So basically the entire 12% of the entire salary plus dearness allowance and employee contribution will have to be put into the PF. Okay. True. And so the question, to answer your question, yes, there are some discussions that OCI should be treated, especially OCIs residing in India. Okay, should be treated as Indian workers.
Yeah.
There are discussions, but that's at the policy level.
It's still at the discussion stage, and we really don't know who owns that discussion.
Who owns? We don't know that, right? Okay.
So just to give you all an idea, an overseas citizen of India gets rights in India as if that person was an Indian citizen, except he cannot hold political office, he cannot vote, and he has certain restrictions on investments, moderate restrictions on investment, admission into education institutes, etc. So they're supposed to be treated on par with Indians, but because they have a foreign passport, because you have a foreign passport, only then you get the OCI, they are considered international workers because the definition in that international workers, that policy document, is a person who has a foreign passport, and that's why you're subject to the EPF.
Yeah, so it's very clear, but the thing is, OCIs are, it's just a misnomer.
It is.
It is a misnomer. It's
visa.
like a green card. You can't even become a judge.
Yeah. You can't become a judge.
And you can't even contribute, you can't even donate money because you're still a foreign source under the foreign contribution FCRA.
FCRA.
Yeah.
Foreign corruption.
So basically, this is, I mean, I'm kind of digressing, but since we're talking about OCIs, it's a very interesting concept. Okay, so those of you who are interested in doing international employment law, please look at this.
Yeah, it's interesting. So Satyajit, tell us something. How are you managing compliance with EPF, expat demands, and practical problems when salary is paid outside?
So I think, and first of all, thanks Roopa, I think that...
Guys, we're just going to take 10 more minutes from... Oh, we still have 9 minutes.
We have
Go
some
ahead,
time.
please.
So I was just saying that I think I'll keep it short, but the basic point is this issue around international workers and PF around international workers and sort of the money being stuck has been something which, I think with the company I'm with now as well as the earlier company, it's been a, grouse of pain for employees. Most of these international workers who come in say, look, we don't care, this money is stuck, so please just treat it as something that you're paying, right? You pay more, pay whatever you want to pay, but just don't, but just don't pay us, make us pay for it or wait for it, etc., etc. And I think, and I don't think that treatment is going to change, but the only hope is, like I think Poorvi, you mentioned the beginning of the, I was about to say the beginning of the class, but at the beginning of the session, that we want to obviously do more social security agreements. I mean, the solution is, or at least that's what the government has said, is we need to do more in terms of doing more local social security agreements. We need to especially cover US, UK, and maybe other countries in Europe where our people are going to. So I would say, frankly, we really can't do much. I don't know if the practitioners have any other thoughts, but...
Sowmya, practical aspects of withdrawing EPF for foreign workers.
This is a huge problem because the EPF regime, like I think again somebody said in the panel, is built a lot on delegated legislation, by which I mean a lot of circulars, guidance, notifications issued by the EPF department. And practically there's another challenge is because how the EPF is structured, you have a central EPFO which sits in Delhi, and they have regional offices in various states and also zonal offices over there. And all of them feed into the central office. Now this issue of international workers, though the law came in 2008, I think it's only in the last 3-4 years this has really sort of gotten bigger. The main authority to decide on IW issues is the Delhi. So oftentimes the local guys do not have much of a clue as to what to do. And those are the guys we approach if we
IW
need
is
anything international
worker.
workers, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
But yeah, the local RPFOs, your jurisdictional EPFOs, whom we approach for day-to-day compliance issues. Now, the minute they see it's an international worker, they say, we don't know, we have to go to Delhi, we need technical guidance, support from Delhi. And then the matter gets stuck for a long period of time until you have the drive and the fire in your belly to keep following up with them. But so this is one of the practical problems with respect to anything to do with international workers, even in the context of withdrawing their contributions. So this is a couple of things, because it's all governed by Delhi and it's governed by internal regulation circulars. This is one of the biggest problem, and often one circular contradicts the other, so nobody knows what to do. So these are some of the practical challenges, I would say.
Right.
Just want to add one more thing. This is the grouse I've had with the EPFO for many years. They are their own regulator and they are the biggest player, only player in their market. So I think, they run the massive, 12,000, 20,000 crore fund which they're managing, or mismanaging as you would want to do. And the only person who's, thank you. Maybe I'll not be called back, but that's great. But I think it's a problem, and whenever you go to them, they'll point out to some obscure circular saying, look, it was fine, we could do it. So absolutely out of
Till
control.
we have somebody go and take them to court, right? Yeah, Manish.
All the grouses that we may have, for the young and the uninitiated, they still pay you more than anybody else.
Your
So
return is
8% return on net of taxes would be 10%. Neither the stock market, nor the real estate, nor gold would give you consistently. So therefore, we may have a grouse against them. And the only other part which I'm saying is what Satyajit say, I completely agree. If you have a foreign worker coming to India, he says, gross it up. I don't care.
Yeah.
I am only interested what goes into my bank account. So therefore, if you are seeing it's something like that, if you think your mother has been tough, your teacher has been tough, wait till you get married. So therefore, if you think that the Indian EPF department has been tough, there are more Indians going abroad than foreigners coming to India. And therefore, it is more of a political issue. If we were to behave as my friend would want them to want the authorities to behave, it is the US and the Gulf which will be at a loss. So it is basically a tax which has been put on employment by US. So once you find this G20 which is happening here, in a few years we will be able to negotiate it. So it is a non-issue, it's a geopolitical issue.
True, it's really politicized, and the US stands to gain immensely with what is currently in place. So Sowmya, Vani, I'm going to come to you if I may now. Can you give us a summary of the EPFO versus Sunil Kumar judgment of the Supreme Court? So between you and Sowmya, I want you to cover that, please. And then if there's time, I'm going to ask the others to comment.
Sure.
So just tell them what that case is about and what happened.
Sure.
Thank you.
So there was an amendment made in the EPFO Act in 2014, under which this amendment particularly stated that a portion of the Provident Fund could be used for, I would say, for pension. And there was a certain discrepancy, I would say, at that point of time when the entire issue was laid out, saying that, if you have registered for EPF prior to from 2014 onwards, you are going to be eligible to this, NPS, and to opt out, whether you would like to have a corpus at the time of retirement, or you would like to have a certain portion of the corpus moving into, I would say, a monthly contribution that will come to you as pension. Now, there was a lack of clarity. There were series of appeals against this amendment in Kerala, in Maharashtra, and in Delhi courts. And the Supreme Court has taken a position now. They've actually upheld the amendment, and where they have clearly said that this is applicable. And so if I have to explain it to the audience in a very layman term, that earlier you would get a certain corpus in your when you retire. Today you have the option to decide that whether a certain portion of the corpus can go as a retainer which will come to you monthly post-retirement. The employee gets that power to decide. Now, And they have been post the judgment in December 2022. There have been a series of circulars, again coming by EPFO, which they themselves are not aware of. Half the time there's a lack of clarity. The HR departments have been going in a frenzy. The companies have been going on a frenzy. The employees confused how they are impacted. Every day we get calls from hundreds of employees asking the question that what am I supposed to do? And this is a phase where the judgment is given. But there's a lack of clarity as to how the circular will play. And the biggest issue is that people who've retired, from 2014 till this time, who've taken a portion of their corpus, the question is, can I give it back? Can I put it back again in the EPF because there's a tax incentive, there's a benefit attached
And
to
they
it?
give the highest return, as Manish said.
And can I just avail it? So how is all that going to play? Again, a circular has come in, but EPF department itself is not clear on the implications. So it's like whoever is making those circulars are not able to answer the questions. But for the companies, once the judgment has come, they've been given guidance by the courts, by EPF department that, look, you have to communicate it to your employees. You have to give the very basic tenets of what is now going to be, and also sensitize the employees, which the HR departments are doing. It's a very standard practice, they're rolling it out. But the fundamental question on the clarity of the circular is still lacking.
So I believe there are some developments in the past 2 weeks since we had our planning call. So Sowmya, did that bring clarity or more confusion?
More confusion,
Oh.
but also some clarity. No, it's not all dark. Okay. There is some clarity, but confusion as well. So yeah, so the main crux of the dispute was that our contributions that the employer make, well, a bulk of it goes into PF, but also a portion of it goes into the pension scheme. And the pension scheme is so designed that if you die or whatever, you will get sort of a monthly payment, which is calculated.
Sowmya, sorry, is that the pension scheme that she described, that number 2?
Yes, absolutely. The thing is that even though I'm contributing a certain percentage of my income to pension, the annuity is calculated on what is called a maximum pensionable amount. That maximum pensionable amount is 15,000 rupees. So the argument was that that's negligible in today's inflationary age. So no matter what my contribution is to the pension scheme, my pensionable, my annuity, the pension I will get is calculated on a mere 15,000 rupees. So the arguments of the petitioners who challenged this amendment, which came out in 2014, was that I'm contributing so much, so my pension also should be based on the higher contribution I'm making. So which was the main point of the debate. So that, and then they went into technicalities and all of that. So the Supreme Court is amazing. So they said, yes, you should be entitled to higher pension, and they've upheld the amendment, but they've sort of watered it down a little bit, which has caused even more confusion to the EPFO in terms of how to implement that. Broadly, principles-wise, everything is good. They've said you should be entitled to higher pension. And then, meanwhile, by the time they challenged it, the EPFO amended the law anyway for a certain section of people. So the main sort of people whom this is going to impact is people who were in service as of this dispute, September 1st, I think, 2014, and those who retired before that, and those who retired who were in service in 2014 and who retired before this judgment came in. So it impacts that section of the employee population. And of course, the EPFO seems to have introduced more conditions, more than what the Supreme Court probably intended to. And just to point out one sort of contradiction that is there. So in the Supreme Court, they didn't go into the technicalities of EPFO, how the EPFO should implement this judgment and all of that. They said in their wisdom, they should implement it. Now, one of the biggest problems is that the higher contribution has obviously gone into the PF account, because that time there wasn't clarity on whether it should go to the PF, whether people can even opt for that higher pension sort of amount. So now, at this point in time, if people do opt for the higher pension, how is the allocation going to happen from the EPF account to the EPS, the pension account of the employee? So this is one of the biggest sort of lack of clarity in the judgment and what is happening on the ground. EPFO doesn't know as of now. They'll have to figure out some sort of internal mechanism. Though to their credit, they've sort of implemented the judgment. They've brought in systems. They've clarified very clearly, even flowchart level clarity they've brought in as to who's eligible, who's not eligible. But this operational bit of how do I transfer the excess contribution that is probably sitting in one account to the other is something which we still don't know.
Satyajit, do you have any views on this, the conundrum or any solution?
Well, you know my views on the EPF are pretty, extreme. We have also, immediately after this entire thing came up, and like I think some of the panelists have said, it's whipped up a frenzy. Employees are coming out, especially people, 2014 onwards who have come through. What there are, and I think, and people are also taking different views, right? They're saying, okay, look, if you're about to, let's say you've been working since 2014 till now, you're about to retire maybe in a year or two, might make sense for you to choose the option and go for a higher pension. But otherwise, don't go, maybe go towards, put money, there's another. So the point is there are also so many schemes around it. So there's employee pension scheme, there's a national pension scheme which is out there. National pension scheme has various options. So I think there are the number of options out there suddenly for people to invest in or save, etc., have gone up. So, I mean, no further views, but I think, like I think some panelists have mentioned, this could have been, I guess, done a little better. And I think, considering it's something which impacts I wouldn't say large, but I think significant portion of our population, 2014 till today, I think could have been just done better.
So the good thing about America is they've got one scheme, the Social Security scheme. But the bad thing about it is you can't take out your money unless you work there for 10 years. While in India, the international worker can take out their money after some hard work, but they still can take their money out. Roopa, I want your comments, and then I'm going to give Manish the last word and the first word he had. So, your comments.
Okay, so just, I mean, basically this became important and we wanted it to be here because yesterday was the last date.
Yeah.
So the Supreme Court judgment was November 4th, 2022.
They had 4 months to implement.
Okay, so, and they had 4 months to implement it, so everybody was jumping. And now they have extended the deadline. So one thing which, as I don't know how many more in-house counsels out there, but I would love to have your views. My recommendation to at least the one client that I'm working with right now is restrict the role of the company. Just tell them what it is and ask them to take advice by the financial advisor.
Independent financial
Independent
advisor.
financial advice. So do not expose the company. And I had to tell them this because a lot of them who were in my office trying to help the company were also interested parties.
Right.
Right? Because they were also going to be affected by this. So I'm like, just go take proper counsel opinion, external counsel opinion.
I think that's very smart. Leave it to them to decide.
Leave it to them to decide. Do not get involved.
Great. Manish, last word. We've run out of time.
Thank you.
Still giving you the
A
last
big thank you.
No comments?
No, it's all. This is a difficulty. It's a good problem to have after 19. After.
You're the only one batting for the EPF.
No. I'm saying. I'm only saying it's a good problem to have. Many people have many views after 2014. Things have changed. This is something which has changed for the better. So I think people will get a higher pension, and you will. And as I said, that EPF has been giving you better interest rate than many. Enjoy your life. Thank you for indulging.
So we're going to end on that optimistic note. Thank you, panelists. You all have been wonderful. Thank you.